Hello and welcome to Asians Represent. I am Liana McKenzie, and this is my eclectic gaming game design podcast. This feels like I've made a little mini series here on toxic design, so I'll let Daniel figure out how he wants to market that. I am joined today by the wonderful Steve, who also a host for Asians Represent. Steve, go ahead and remind everyone who you are and why you are awesome.
Oh, thank you. No, it's really good to be kind of back in the casting chair, I guess, as it were, because I've been away from the actual microphone for a while. But for those who may remember or may not remember me, my name's Steve Wen. I'm a Vietnamese tabletop RPG streamer and writer based out of Toronto. Really into fitness, into cooking, all that good stuff. Not recently, it was a while ago, published the manual game exercise, which kind of combined Dungeons and Dragons and workout. And now I'm here talking about toxicity, which is, yeah, what a way to kick things off in 2025 for me.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a topic of interest, I would say, in this day and age.
Yeah.
So we're going to be mostly focusing on the game League of Legends, which has been a very interesting thing to watch with like season 2 of Arcane coming out and all of that, which we'll get into. But let's get into it. We'll kind of intro the topic to start us off, and then we will discuss toxicity in games through the lens of League of Legends. But to begin, League of Legends has been a staple of the gaming environment for a long time. Debuting in 2009, at its peak, it was the most played video game in the world. It spawned a competitive professional gaming scene, several spin off games, and the award winning animation Arcane, based on the game setting of Runeterra. Based on the wildly popular Warcraft 3 custom map Defense of the Ancients, League of Legends' core gameplay revolves around a 5 versus 5 battles on a single main map where players will each take different positions and play one of over 170 different champions, all of whom have unique kits and abilities. For many years, this game was just a household name among gamers. It's been very interesting, though, as the most recent season of Arcane was dropped. You were hearing a lot of people saying things like, shoot, does this mean I have to play League again? Which would always immediately be followed by everyone else around them saying very quickly, don't do it, it's not worth it. Despite its many successes, there is a core problem to League, and that problem is that actually playing the game is a miserable experience. Today, we wanted to examine the construction and gameplay of League of Legends and identify the many pain points in the design that make the experience so unpleasant. And Steve, I know you have a lot of thoughts on this, but
I have so many thoughts, but my very first
wanted
thought
to.
is I can't believe it's 170. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
170, you wrote it down,
Yeah, I
and I
did.
knew it coming into it, but when I heard it, my brain for some reason was just like, go, what?
Yeah, 170 champions, and you
I
better
had to,
know all of them,
you
or
better
you
know
will
all of it
fail.
inside out. So for context here, I went and I looked up just right now. So Dota has 100 at the time of recording, has 126.
Okay.
Honor of Kings has 122, and Pokemon Unite, sorry, I'm typing here, has 62. I
Which
mean,
is funny because Pokemon has a lot of Pokemon.
it has a lot, and they just showed so much restraint on this. But also, we'll talk probably about this, but Pokemon Unite is supposed to be very accessible to a wide range of players. So 62 feels like a very reasonable number, given it's a MOBA still. But sorry, I got hung up on 170.
Oh, no worries. I mean, we'll probably talk about this a bit, but there's obviously a financial incentive for Riot to continue cranking out champions. But what I did want to actually start us with is how they reward success and punish failure. This has always, for me, been one of the biggest frustrations. Bit of background. So I got into League of Legends when they introduced the Dominion mode, which I am and will forever be extraordinarily salty that they removed, because Dominion was as close to my platonic ideal of a competitive game as you could get. I never really liked Summoner's Rift because I don't like the tower push and farm minion game construction. Whereas Dominion, when I was playing it, it was very much about like constantly team fighting over capture points. So there was a lot of very, very fast, very dynamic combat at the higher level. People were just kind of rotating all over the map. So there were skirmishes everywhere. You might end up on like 2v2 or 4v4 or 1v1 or like entire team fights for the bottom positions. It was really fun. I really liked it. And also the games ended up being very close because of how they set up the economy. Um, it could swing on a dime. I literally had several games in Dominion where the base strength was basically at one because it was a countdown from like 500 down to one, and when you hit zero, you lost based on the capture points you had. And I literally had a game that sat for like 5-ish minutes where both of us were at one on the base, and we were just frantically fighting all over the map, and it was some of the most fun I've ever had in a competitive game. Um, the problems I've always run into with League of Legends, Summoner's Rift, their main game, the kind of the only game that exists now except for ARAM, which we can also talk about a bit if we get to it. Um, they're very, very much built around kind of rewarding wins to the point where like getting the first kill in the game is highly rewarded, even more so now with their new like the Noxus variants that they've introduced, where like scoring the first kill can be a stepping stone to getting like your super cool boot upgrades or whatever. Um, and like losing even one fight, you lose all of that farm because you're respawning, and then the person who killed you also gets a huge reward. So it's I've likened it to like getting into getting into a ring, into a boxing ring, and the guy who scores the first knockout gets to tape a knife to his glove for the next round. And
Yeah.
you who lost the first round just like, okay, I guess this is my life now. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on that, especially since you are a Dota player, so you've experienced it from different angles as well.
Yeah, not just Dota, but I mean, when I hear 5-on-5, my brain can't help but think to like more traditional physical sports like
Mm-hmm.
hockey, soccer, to some extent like tennis, where it's 2-on-2, 1-on-1. And, you know, in physical sports, there isn't really the concept of like kind of, but not really, like resource management, right? Like it's not when you're playing hockey, it's not really an economics game. It's not about like trying to figure out how to maximize your time on the ice. There's a lot more going on because of the physicality of it. So, you know, the boxing analogy is quite apt because it's ridiculous because not real, but like physical sports and MOBAs don't really map onto each other. Though I'll probably talk about it more. There's a lot I think we can borrow from physical sports in terms of sportsman like conduct and general being pleasant. But anyways, in terms of Dota and League of Legends, like Dota also is an economics game, right? It's all about how are you spending your time, how are you spending your gold, how are you spending your um, map control and things like that. But in recent time, Dota just doesn't have this kind of very big intense snowball effect. First Blood gives you a huge bonus at the start, but that bonus actually kind of fades away probably after about making it up here like 5 minutes or so, which can be a really long time. But if you just simply break even for 5 minutes, that advantage is pretty much going to go away. So it's really more a matter of kind of understanding the game in that way, which, to your point, if you don't understand that's how the game is designed, if you just kind of tilt yourself after first blood and try to go for second blood and third or whatever, and you just keep botching it, you're going to be so far behind that basically the game is over before it
Mm-hmm.
even started, really.
And that's something that because League, the way League scaling works is you have 6 item slots, and you stop scaling after you've completely filled those 6 items. So that first blood advantage of 200 gold, I believe it is going to be something you can ride until like the 30-minute mark when items finally start to hit parity. Um, so it's in my experience, especially like as a non-professional player, um, I would often find that a game's pretty much been decided within 10 minutes because a team does very well early game and they just keep being able to parlay that advantage into a bigger advantage. Since again, you're now boxing someone with a knife taped to their glove. So like it becomes harder and harder to win with every loss you take. And that doesn't stop compounding itself unless you can somehow stall it out for a
Yeah.
long time, which some people can do, obviously. But for your average player, in most cases, if you're racking up leads like that, the game's pretty much over. But
Yeah.
then you have to play for ostensibly another like 10-20 minutes to actually get to the deciding factor of the game, which is frustrating. But also, like, there are surrender mechanics which have their own issues. We'll get into that a bit later. um but having a game turn so heavily on the early wins, and that's not to say there aren't some comeback, because you do eventually get bounties for taking down like high kill champions and stuff
Yep.
like that. And with the more recent seasons, I know they've been trying to address that, but since we actually, with the community, we got on and we played a bit, it felt better. It didn't feel good, at least for me.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you were feeling on that, Steve.
Well, I think the other part of that is I primarily come from a background where I want to see games to go to completion. Like I
Mhm.
want to see all three phases, all three periods, the four quarters of a game as much as I possibly can. So even if it's going to be a horrible loss for me, I value being there for the final minutes of the game because I feel
Mhm.
like I'm learning and growing better as a player. But that's again back to my physical sports experience where it's unheard of to just like surrender a match, right? It's bad for you as a player and someone who like respects the sport, and it's bad for your opponents because it's really disruptive for them because even if they're winning and doing really really well, you should like loud them. You should feel happy for them, even though at the end of the day, you're going to take the L.
I do want to say, at least in America, we do, for youth sports, sometimes they will invoke a mercy rule,
Hmm?
where if the lead is so insurmountable and it's just such a massive mismatch, they will call the game.
So what's interesting in Canada, in my experience, our mercy rule is slightly different. So imagine like the big scoreboard. It's
Hmm.
13-0 in a hockey
Right.
game, which is
Hmm.
unheard of. Most games go to like 5, right? At around 13 or so, they'll just stop counting points.
Hmm.
So the game will continue. And for the losing team, if they get a goal, their
I think,
goals go on the
yeah,
board. But
I
you're
do
going to put,
think that might happen sometimes in America. There are a number of different ways that they do it. Like
for
sometimes they
sure.
won't even keep score for at all, but like everyone's keeping score anyway.
Yeah,
But I have seen occasion, like there are some instances in U.S. sports where they will do the mercy rule.
for sure. Yeah. Um, and I think, another thing, a part of the physical sports is
Mhm.
there's the actual endurance aspect, like the
Oh yeah.
actual cardiovascular endurance, where you probably should practice running a game for the full 60 minutes because that's what you need to train for. Whereas in League of Legends, the game's going to go for 30 minutes on average, plus or minus like 10 probably. And the difference between going for 30 to 40 to 20 minutes is really not masking that much
No,
physically, mentally.
no. Uh, Interesting too, because we mentioned earlier the pro scene. Pros will do sets of 3 or 5.
Right.
And that's kind of how they create the esports aspect too, is it'll be a set. Um, so you'll have best of 3 and then best of 5 for kind of like the finales and stuff like that to kind of draw it out more and make that endurance a bit more of a factor.
Yeah. Um, I actually really do like I love actually watching pro esports because of kind of like the multiple matches. It makes me feel very much like I'm watching more
Hmm.
traditional sports. And I will get like rowdy. Like I will be in bars in Toronto watching esports and just like having drinks and yelling and shouting. Like it for me, it's like it is a real sport because it is.
Oh
And I
yeah,
love it.
absolutely. So we've gone to some of the LCS shows in LA when we were visiting, back when Dominion still existed, so I still cared about League to that point. Um, and It was a lot of fun. Like we got to go to kind of some of the more general competitive ones where they have all the US teams play off. And then once we got to go to their All Stars theme where they did a bunch of wacky things, which is also pretty fun. Like it's a good time just being in the studio there with like the energy in the crowd.
Yeah. But I mean, for League of Legends and this kind of idea where if I had to ballpark it, I would say 80% to 90% of the time, I'm with you. I can call a game in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, that's actually really disappointing from
Mm-hmm.
both the audience perspective and like the player perspective.
Oh,
Because if you can
absolutely.
call it with that amount of certainty, it feels like the game is kind of like it's like a cheaper experience. Whereas I feel like for Dota, I would say about 40% of the time I can make a comeback. Like of my wins, if we were to chunk it up, 40% of them are comebacks. Maybe 30 to 40% are comebacks, which is like a really, really high number,
Yeah.
in my opinion, compared to League of Legends.
Yeah. And that's I think kind of one of the core factors that leads into this toxicity is because so often a game has been decided, there's not a lot of incentive to play it out, right? Because if everyone knows they've lost, why would we stick around? uh, I think now's a good time to actually let's jump ahead and talk about surrendering.
Yeah.
um, I I'm of two minds on this,
Yeah.
because like I don't like having to, like I am someone who hates wasting her time. I The most infuriating thing to me is feeling trapped doing something that I don't want to be doing and just stuck there. So like because in most cases Summoner's Rift games are basically over by the 10-minute mark, but you still need to in theory play it out for another 10 to 20. Though like anything past that like point where it's decided is miserable for me. So psychologically for me I'm just like let's just surrender, get it done, move on. That's already going to be a psychological deterrent because if you feel that the game's over because the game has shown consistently that it generally is over by that point, that's going to make you more frustrated and make you more potentially toxic. um, but also too, that early drive to surrender gets in that way of that sportsmanship thing that you mentioned, Steve, where people will just give up, and that'll also impact play, and it creates a really honest kind of nasty culture around it too. Like I've been kind of ramming into ARAM because I do at my core like I love how a lot of the champions play in League of Legends. So like I've just been kind of dicking around in ARAM a bit, just because it is kind of fun for me. Like I like how the game plays. I wish I could be playing Dominion again, but that is I'm gonna be harping on Dominion this entire episode. I'm sorry.
I think if you mention Dominion 10 times this episode, we all get like a free Subway sandwich. Is that
Yeah,
how
yeah,
that
or something
works?
like that. Yeah.
Great.
Uh, you're gonna get like 3 or 4 sandwiches by the end of
Perfect.
it. But even in ARAM, I have noticed people start like ARAM is a lot less decided. It's more because of how they boosted some of the numbers and stuff like that, and it's a quicker match. Comebacks are a lot more possible in ARAM. Um, but like I will see people like if you get aced where all 5 of your members are taken out. Um, I've seen people even in like a close ace where we went like 3-5, for example. So like two members left on the other side. Not great, but I will see people like immediately call for a surrender, even if we are like up 2 towers and an inhibitor.
Yeah.
And that was the first time they got us, and they haven't even taken a single tower down. So like it creates this like I don't know quitter culture, and I'm kind of in it too, right? Where I'm like, well, this is done. I don't want to keep playing anymore. But then seeing it extend to like the game modes that are supposed to be faster and breezier to begin with, and are supposed to be a bit more swingy, um, it it doesn't feel great when you're playing a game that you know is totally winnable, and people are still like, "Hey, let's just surrender now." Uh, so
Yeah.
I don't know what the best response is for this one, honestly.
Well, I mean, we can look at other MOBAs here.
Yeah,
So, for example, Dota does not have a surrender mechanic. So it's not there. They've introduced kind of like a kind of sort of one for professional games, but when there's an international audience watching you and you're surrendering, there are other factors there. So for intents and purposes, for the casual player, there's no surrender mechanic. Honor of Kings, that's the new Chinese MOBA on mobile devices.
right. Yeah, the phone
Those
one.
matches go 15 to 20 minutes, and there is a surrender mechanic. But games, I've never seen a game go past 30 minutes.
Yeah,
Um, Pokemon Unite does have a surrender mechanic, but you have to be like far, far into the game. In which case, you might just like finish the game in like 2 minutes by the time you can surrender.
Unite matches are pretty quick too, if memory serves.
They are 15 minutes maximum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So League of Legends, it has like a very specific kind of surrender mechanic where basically at any point in time you can pull that lever and just say like, "Hey everyone, can we collectively agree this is a waste of our time?"
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, to your point, is kind of like, it's not a direct cause of toxicity, but it does kind of change the way you perceive, one, the game, two, your teammates, and three, the other team.
Right.
And I've talked about this a lot in the past where when I come into MOBA games, I treat it like a sport where I highly respect the game. I'm here to play the game because I love the game. I'm here to play with my teammates because they are my teammates. For the next 40 minutes, you're my family.
Right.
Right. And like family. And my opponents, for the next 40 minutes, you're like a well respected like player on the field. And I'm going to treat you just like I want to be treated on the field. And I like that came obviously from my background of physical sports. But as time goes on, I'm just noticing a lot of players just don't have this mindset. And it can cause a lot of tension, especially when I'm talking to other players where I'm like, yeah, I know this looks really bad, but even though we're going to lose, let's call this a scrimmage. Let's practice. And people are like, what are you talking about? I'd rather practice against bots.
Right.
And I'm like,
God.
oh, no.
Well, and that's something too, right? Like, because I would rather practice against bots. Really translates to I would rather win.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And I think, like, if I had to encapsulate this, I think when you have like these kind of surrender mechanics, you kind of treat the game as like almost like a commodity, where it's kind of like you look at the game less like a game with back and forths and all these like very intricate and nuanced mechanics and stories and mini stories that happen within the play space, and you look at more like L's and W's.
Right.
And I think when you have this very clear idea that this thing you're consuming is just either green or red, L or W, thumbs up, thumbs down,
Mm-hmm.
the entire experience leans towards this kind of toxic consumerist idea of it.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of discussion for competitive games where like a lot of people say they want close matches. And like I at least personally feel like I do mean that, and that like I Dominion, go ahead and punch your sandwich card again. Like one of those games I mentioned earlier where it got down to one base health for like 5 minutes of just back and forth. We lost. That was still one of like the funnest experiences I had ever had because
Absolutely.
it was so good. Like everyone was firing on all cylinders. We were fighting tooth and nail. Like points would get captured and immediately other points would be neutralized so that it wouldn't tick the scale. And at the end of it, like everyone was super pumped and everyone was like, GG, and we all meant it because it was such a good game. I don't feel like I've often seen or had that experience in the Summoner's Rift League because the game often ends up so one-sided.
Yeah.
I have occasionally had very close matches, but they feel like the exception, not the rule.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because you probably had more closer matches in ARAM where the design of the map and the design of the game is significantly different.
Yes.
So I will just flat out say I think Summoner's Rift is a bad map, and I think it's poorly designed.
Yes.
Which is wild because like for the layman, if you look at that map and look at Dota's map, they're identical.
Mm-hmm.
But what Dota has is that the map is actually significantly bigger. Like
Mm-hmm.
when you go to a different lane, you're putting like a huge investment. Like it can take you like 20 seconds to walk to a different lane. Faster if you're like a faster champion or hero, but otherwise it's like a huge investment. So when you go and you try to get that advantage, that kill, and you
Mm-hmm.
fail, one, you've wasted a ton of your time. Two, that person that's there that survived kind of has an advantage now. Three, you've also disadvantaged your party member because you've halved the experience they get, potentially also the gold they got, depending on like what you're doing there. Um, so like the actual investment in that is you have to think a lot more. It's a lot more cognitively demanding. Whereas I feel like League of Legends for Summoner's Rift, you just kind of like float around. You're basically everywhere all the time.
It takes 5 to 10 seconds, I feel like.
So like half the time,
Yeah.
basically.
Half
Yeah,
to a quarter.
yeah,
Because like I play Hecarim a lot in the jungle when I do play. And he is a speedy little horse boy. And I can run him quickly through the map.
yeah, yeah. And I don't know. I feel I haven't really had a chance too much to speak about the actual game design of the map. But if you think of like the ARAM, where it's just one lane and everyone's going to funnel into one, this is really interesting because even if you're behind, what happens is the creeps will get closer to you,
Mm-hmm.
usually where your towers are, and usually where your towers are stronger. And
Yep.
correct me if I'm wrong, but do towers give you a buff in League?
I don't recall.
They do in
I
Dota.
do know that fighting under tower is just exceptionally dangerous.
Yes.
Uh and like I've several times found myself in ARAM where we had them push up to the tower, but and being thinking like, no, we need to back off. We cannot siege this. And then, someone might dive and then die immediately because the tower just kills them.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
uh and it's like, yeah, we should have just backed off. But
Yeah. I think it's really interesting
burn
because
burn
that
bright little star.
yes. So what's interesting is because you can see basically, wherever your enemy is, even if you can't see
Yeah.
them. You can
Mhm.
basically predict they're going to be just outside your field of vision, but they're not going to come from the side or flank you or things like that. So in ARAM, your actual cognitive load is a lot lower.
It is.
And because of that, you can now like focus more on teamwork and kind of what you need to focus on for the next clash or whatever you want to call it. In Dota, because it takes so long for you to go to a different lane, you have twice the amount of time, maybe 4 times the amount of time to actually notice the change in the map and then like react accordingly. Which, if you do, feels really, really good. And I think it starts to like get into that vibe of like, oh my god, I'm still in it to win it. Like, there's
Mhm.
still a chance here.
Yeah. Yeah, and creating that mindset is so important. Um, whereas, and this is another thing that I don't know if Dota does this, but League, every kill is announced. First blood is announced. Dragon kills are announced. Baron is announced. And having been a new player, it's intimidating as hell that every time I fail at my laning task, the game is going to call me out. Because often, because everything is right out there and it is talking about it all the time, that's going to filter into chat, and then chat's going to start yelling at you if you are not doing a good enough job.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Dota does have that. And that, in my opinion, is a huge. At one hand, it's functional. Like, you
Yeah.
do want to know
Mhm.
who's taken off the map because that informs your next decision.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the way it's announced, right, can be really, really damaging.
Mhm.
So Dota used the is it Unreal Tournament? The free source like call
Unreal
outs.
or
I think it's Unreal.
because Unreal is the engine and the game, right? Unreal
Yeah.
Tournament. Yeah, yeah.
Um we can correct this later. But it has like that open source like announcer, right? And that
Right,
announcer
right.
is actually quite aggressive. And that's because of
Mhm.
like the game is supposed to have this kind of like Mad Maxian feel to it, like it's
Okay,
dystopian,
yeah. So
right?
that's probably the Unreal Tournament announcer. Okay, I think.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
And then League of Legends, of course, riffed off of that using their own announcer, but it's
Mhm.
using the same kind of lines like ultra kill, mega kill, like pentakill, that
Pentakill,
kind of
yeah.
stuff.
Or like double,
Godlike,
triple,
things like that.
quadra, godlike. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They
Yeah,
use
yeah,
that.
exactly.
It's a
And that
more
could be,
it's a more neutral feminine tone for the announcer, but yeah.
yeah. And then I recall because I was playing Smite and I got a free announcer, and the announcer not just like called out the kills, but also mocked me.
Right.
like would call me like names and
Oh God.
make up excuses for me. And I was like, wow, this is like a super bad experience, and it really like hopefully coming into this, like you can hear that when I play sports and play esports, like I'm really into it. Like I really invest and I want to be a positive
Mhm.
player. But even that announcer gets on me, and I'm like, ooh, I kind of just want to quit.
Yeah.
I want to surrender.
Yeah, and that's a big thing. Is like how the game chooses to convey information to you is going to affect you emotionally.
Exactly.
And like coming off of the big like pentakill or whatever, where someone just completely rips your party apart, it doesn't feel good. Um, even like the so and so has been slain or whatever. Like it's just announcing your failure to the entire team. And at least in League, that can quickly grow into like the team starting to yell at you, which, as everyone knows, always solves every problem for performance when everyone starts yelling at you about how much you suck.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know about you, but I do my best work when people call me names and are
Yeah,
mean
exactly.
to me.
Yeah,
Yeah, great.
yeah. It's so constructive. Absolutely. So like the way, especially again tying into that like snowball factor, like seeing those numbers and hearing those announcing it's a morale hit, right? Like you start to feel like, all right, well, we're screwed because that idiot up in top lane can't hold it or whatever. Um, it's not it's not being constructive, right? It's not saying like assists top lane or whatever. It's just saying like, yeah, this dummy keeps getting killed.
Yeah,
It sucks to be you.
yeah. I think that also comes down to in League of Legends when someone is like really down on their luck and it begins snowballing like that. That's where it's like 90% of the time you can be like, we've lost this
Yeah,
because of that one person's decisions and the poor decision making skills. This is a loss.
yeah.
Whereas in games like Dota, there's more of a rubber banding factor, which is you can recover from that in
Mm-hmm.
multiple ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think Dota also has a lot of champions that can really take advantage of poor situations like that. So League of Legends has ratting a little bit, but definitely in my experience, not to the extent that Dota has it. When I say ratting, what I mean is fights are going on somewhere in the map, and one of your champions is like, I refuse to participate, and instead takes objectives.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think is
League
a really
League calls that split pushing, and they do have some champions who are capable of doing that.
oh, that's interesting. Called split pushing. We call it ratting because
Mm-hmm.
it's more fun that way, and you feel like a little sneaky little rat guy.
Yeah.
Like that's fun. But you can absolutely just go into a team fight with no intent to actually win the team fight, just to waste their time
Mm-hmm.
and just have another hero being somewhere else being like, I'm actually taking the win objective right now. So either finish this fight or go back, in which case I'll take another objective with the four of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is something. There are certain champions who can do that quite well. Um, I think he's fallen off since there's so many other champions out. But Jax was notorious for doing this.
Mhm.
The lamppost wielding champion, where he could just like chunk towers.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah,
and
and
that would show up a lot in the pro scene when we were watching it, where he would be a potential split push.
for sure.
But team the champions who can do this weren't necessarily a required champion to have on your team. So this strategy was something you could potentially pick into, but it was usually pretty well telegraphed. And because of that, uh it becomes very predictable, I guess would be the thing, where it's like they picked a champion who is good at doing this, so we can just kind of expect that they're going to do this.
Yeah,
And that makes counterplay very easy, and it makes the strategy itself less effective.
exactly. In Dota, I would say 90% of the carries with the right item choices
Mm-hmm.
can just transition to this. You have to make a conscious choice and invest in this. But if you can, you could do this pretty effectively with like 90% of the carries, which is really interesting because as a team, you might say, hey, we can't fight them anymore. Every single time we clash with them, we lose. They just have a better stack up for that. So I'd like you to start buying these items.
Mm-hmm.
And there are guides in Dota's UI where you can just like key in something and like try to find it, um, and just buy those items. And suddenly the whole way you play the game changes.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I play League of Legends with you or like other people from like Asians Represent or just random people, I always crave this like flexibility because I actually have that flexibility when I play physical sports. Because when I play
Mm-hmm.
physical sports, we have positions, we have, obviously we can change how we move our bodies and whatnot. But I always feel like I have this autonomy and freedom to try something new, to do something wild, just to experiment. The worst case scenario, I lose. But hey, if I keep doing what I'm doing right now, I'm going to lose anyways.
Yeah, and League has kind of off-meta builds,
Mm-hmm.
but they tend to be a lot swingier or less effective. And in playing ARAM, I've been looking up item builds because I'm sweaty like that. And a lot of times the builds are very much like I'm seeing the same items for different champions. Like,
For
this is
sure.
what you are. And getting to the carry thing, carries, from my recollection, they can split push. However, most of them don't have strong escape potential. So, and because they're so fragile, um, if you attempt to split push, the team can just like descend on you and kill you.
Yeah. But that's
What
in League,
made
right?
Yeah, in League.
Yeah.
What made Jack so effective is he was tankier because he was a bruiser. He was a melee bruiser. His whole thing is like he builds momentum as he hits. So he just keeps hitting a tower and it just keeps hitting it harder and harder and
Yep.
harder. But also he has a leap that can leap to enemies or allies. So he's tankier. He's able to like take an initial salvo and then he can just jump away and run off while cackling.
Yeah. Whereas in Dota, basically you can do that kind of stuff purely by items.
Mm-hmm.
So you can build the Manta style, which gives you illusions, which do damage, not as much to towers, but do damage to towers. You get illusions. And you can buy a blink dagger, so you can blink away. You can
Mm-hmm.
flash
Yeah.
as an item. And also you can buy my beloved Black King Barb BKB in Dota, which makes you a CC immune.
Mm-hmm.
So you can just build yourself to always escape.
Right.
And that's obviously a heavy investment of your resources,
Mm-hmm.
but you can absolutely do that almost with any champion, any
Yeah.
hero.
And like there are some itemizations like the uh Knight's Edge or something like that. There is an item
Oh
that
yeah,
has
yeah, yeah.
heavy armor penetration and lets you and gives you that spell shield.
Yep,
So like there are some items like that, but like I think of some of the carries can do it.
yep,
Like Ezreal is pretty mobile, for example, but he's kind of more of a chip damage kind of champion. I actually really like playing him. He's slippery, and there's a lot of cool things you can do with him. Or like Lucian, who he has kind of some dashes away. Even Caitlyn's got like a bit of a disengage, but it's not super strong. I feel like
yep.
outside of Ezreal's blink. So yeah, there's always that danger aspect, and because of there's such a heavy investment in itemization. I don't feel like that's something that happens often because you're trying to get to your six item.
Exactly.
And so like selling everything off and respecking is just unheard of.
And even beyond that, how do you even know like what items to buy? Like I just named 3 items from
Mm-hmm.
Dota, and if you're new to Dota, you have no clue what these are, what
Right.
they do. And then there's like a running joke on Dota where it's like I have too many buttons. So League
Mm-hmm.
of Legends, very few of the items have an active, but in Dota, a lot of them have actives. So what you're taking is you're
League's
already
actually been
very
stripping
complex.
down. Yes, League's been stripping down their actives a lot. I coming back to it, I all of these items that used to have actives just don't have them anymore.
Yeah. So I mean, like in that way, yes, you have that flexibility in a game like Dota, but the learning curve to get there and
Mm-hmm.
understand that that's even a possibility is like probably like 200 away,
Right.
200 hours away from like a beginner to even
Mm-hmm.
understand, which is wild.
Well, that seems like a great point to transition then into learning curve, because we've kind of already been getting into this. Um, so we talked about a lot about like itemization, money, and stuff like that. I think we've covered that pretty well. But learning curve, I think, is a big issue too. So you mentioned like how Dota has that big for like the itemization and stuff like that. Um, I definitely feel like League has a very heavy learning curve too.
Mhm.
Part of the appeal for me of playing League is just that because I already know how most of these champions work, I don't have to relearn anything. Also, Dota games can last for 40 minutes, and I'm not about that life.
Fair, fair.
Um, like I would be pulling my hair out in frustration having to play a game for that long. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
no,
not built.
I totally feel that. I
I'm not
understand.
built for that. But League's meta is extremely intricate. I feel like Dota kind of in the same way, like between like top lane, bot lane, jungle, how that's all supposed to work. So there's like a huge learning curve. Even if you're watching the pro games, like there's a lot to take in. Um, at least when we were watching the procasters generally helped a lot. But like going from someone who's watching pro games to actually trying to play the game, like there's a lot that you need to really dig into for the minutia of like how this works, how you're supposed to play the game, what's expected of you, and then also 170 characters that you need to learn the kits of so that you don't fail.
Yep.
Like I when I first started playing, um, I I had played Lux and she was cool, so I bought Lux, the champion.
Yep.
And I was up against a champion Akali, who is like an assassin. Um, and like we got in a fight, and I had her really low, so I tried to chase after her, and she put this cloud thing down. I didn't know what it did, but it stealthed her, and then she just completely murdered me
Hmm.
from full health, and everyone started yelling at me for being an idiot.
Oh no.
And I stopped playing there and
Yeah.
didn't pick it up again until Dominion came out. Punch your card.
Mhm.
Because like that was just a horrible experience.
Of
And that was like
course.
my third game.
Yeah. I think, yeah, League of Legends and Dota, I would say, are like on the upper end of like complexity. It is a
Mhm.
complex game. And I think one thing that I missed comparing again to physical sports is like when I play things like hockey, hockey
Mhm.
is also a very complex sport. Like a
Mhm.
lot goes on. And although the win condition is very obvious, the actual way you get there is very, very complex and takes place over 60 minutes. Um, so a lot can happen in that time. But when you play hockey, you almost always have a coach who's going to like guide you and talk you through it. And League of Legends, Dota, they don't have an explicit coach who you're going to have to help explain to you certain things.
Yeah.
If your child, oh,
Especially
go
because
ahead.
like I don't feel like the bots, at least when I was playing, I haven't done a bot match recently. I should have tried it, but I don't believe bots jungle. So like
Really?
you can't because the complexity of the programming for it just didn't work for them. Um, they may have figured it out. I don't believe they have though. Um, so like in a bot match, you're not even really getting like the full experience of how you're supposed to play. So like, how do you learn off of that? Like,
Yeah,
how do you go from fighting against bots to fighting against people?
yeah, exactly. And I think physical sports have that advantage because there's no such thing as a bot match. You only ever play either in a very specific kind of drill, which is like a solo drill. Like you're just going to shoot, you're just going to hit a ball against the wall for 15 minutes. And
Right.
you're going to focus on one specific skill. And like these games could put you through drills, but drills suck and they're boring.
Yeah.
What
No
you
one's gonna
really
want to do
do
that.
through your learning is you have a coach to give you feedback and you're on the field, you're on the ice, whatever it is, playing the game and getting that feedback too. And you're just always in this way of like getting very, very good information back to you to make you a better player.
So I'm gonna say though, I don't think we should be looking at hockey, which is a very expensive sport.
Ooh,
There's a
good
lot of
point.
organization. I think what we should be looking at is basketball
Okay.
because basketball has a pickup culture where you can just have a pickup game with people that you find. Um, in general, I feel like if we were to compare kind of the league sports and how their matches work, I feel like basketball would probably be about the closest
Yeah, basketball or maybe soccer. Yeah.
in that it's pretty easy to just like you need to go to a place that has a net, pick your variant of net. Soccer is probably a better example in this
Yeah.
case just because it's a lower scoring game and is played so internationally. But like basketball or soccer both kind of have that where you're not necessarily in your nascent phase is going to be having a coach or anything. You're just going to be finding some folks on a court and playing with them.
I think that's a really good point. Yeah, and maybe that's like a point to call out because I come from a very structured,
Mm-hmm.
almost formal kind of sports background, and that has obviously shaped the way I engage with esports and MOBAs. Um, I would like to think that like I'm a pretty positive player, so like that formal education of sports really lent itself well to this like new ecosystem. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Not everyone comes from that and has the ability to say I spent 200 hours with a coach in hockey, and I spent all this money on it.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like economically, MOBAs do fall more into that category because like soccer and basketball traditionally have been, at least in the states, sports that are very easy to get into.
For sure.
Because you can just find some other kids playing on a field. There are usually nets set up where kids can play. Although America is trying to get rid of places kids can play, so like that's awesome.
Yeah.
But like you just need to find a court that has like a hoop set up.
Yeah. Or for soccer,
And
you just find a field and put down 2 backpacks for your
yeah,
net
yeah,
and you just play.
yeah, exactly. So it's much more accessible, much in the way that a free to play MOBA is, to people who don't have money. Who and the pickup I feel like is kind of an automated match system to kind of do that to you too, right? Where you're just like, we're gonna match you with 9 other people,
Hmm.
and we're gonna throw you on the court and show us your stuff. No coaching, no nothing.
Yeah. But I think the other thing that's interesting is that we know that now
Mm-hmm.
games have like this ELO score
Right.
and it's matching you people what it thinks are kind of like your rough
Yep.
skill level. Whereas in pickup games, in my experience, like playing basketball and things like that, like I might be on a team with someone who like has just learned some basic skills of basketball, but they are up against people who are way out of their league. Like, and in some ways, you're kind of like a hindrance to us.
Mm-hmm.
But I would never like ping them a bunch of times on the map to tell them that like they're out of position. I would never call them names. I would never do these kind of things. Whereas I think League of Legends, something is going on in like that internal calculus for a lot of
Mm-hmm.
players where it's so easy just to like dive into these really toxic habits, ping them on the map, spam chat, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think part of that is because it is so hostile to new players. One, there's not a lot of churn, so someone who's just starting out isn't going to have that. Like when League was first starting out, even that experience I had, right? A 3 games in player who have done this was like my third PvP match ever. Um, I was in with a bunch of people who had been playing for a while, and this was when League was still fairly new. So they've never really, I feel like, had the capability to have the new enough players to match with each other. So you're always going to be matched with people who are familiar with and have expectations for the game. Um, there's no newbie bonus. Like I play Final Fantasy 14,
Right.
which is a very co-op game. But whenever a new player comes in, they're like, "Hey, you have a new player. We're giving you like an EXP or a tombstone bonus to guide them through." So there's none of that, which in League's culture is probably a good thing, because if everyone sees the newbie thing, like who knows how that's going to go for toxicity. But also resultantly, like there's not a good way to get players trained up or introduced into the game to retain them,
Mhm.
because you just throw them to the wolves, and if they survive, then they will become a player. Um, and if they don't, then that opportunity is gone, and you've just lost yet another player. Or like, and sometimes people will survive to a point, and eventually they'll get fed up and leave. Hence, like the conversations I was talking about earlier with Arcane, where everyone's like, "Oh shoot, I need to play League of Legends again." And everyone's like, "No, don't do it. It's not worth it."
Yeah. I think that's such an interesting concept of like what I'll generally call like mentorship. Like, does your game and do your mechanics value new players, and how does it like actually do that? And Final Fantasy 14 is a great example where it's saying we actually really value our new players,
Mm-hmm.
and we expect you like it's an
Yeah.
expectation on veteran players to mentor them. In fact, if you're a veteran player and you don't want to mentor them, you just lose out on all these bonuses.
Mm-hmm.
Keep playing your game, whatever, but you don't get these things.
Well, even that, like, Final Fantasy 14 has such a lovely culture built around the sprouts because, like, they give you a little icon. It's a little sprout because
Yeah,
you're a little sapling. So when you're new to the game, you have this, and 14's built this wonderful culture around like nurturing the sprouts, right? Um, and there are issues there too, like sometimes sprouts won't be playing well, and there's always that question of like, do I want to teach them? I've always had very good experiences where I've been playing with them. I've noticed issues in what they were doing and how they're playing the game, so I will go like, hey, would you like a bit of advice, or would you like some tips? And if they say no, then I'm not gonna do anything. If they say no, or they don't say anything. But often I've had people like say sure, yeah,
yeah,
and then I'll go in, since I've played all of the jobs up to pretty high level, so I know how to play them all. And I'll teach them a bit, and they'll be pretty receptive, and then they'll improve. Um, so like there is there is no culture of that in League, and I feel like to foster that, it would require a lot of effort.
absolutely.
Um,
And I mean, from the pure game design perspective, like if I want the win, like if I'm here
mhm.
to win,
Yeah,
I'm going to find who's your sprout on your team, and I'm going to abuse the crap out of them on the
right.
field.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to take advantage of it. I'm going to rack up kills, and I'm going to put you so far behind that there's no way you can recover. But that's like the game informing me as the player what the most like
Who's the
best
most
way of like
vulnerable? Yeah.
to do it. And like your opponent team that has this sprout on them, they have no incentive to protect them.
Right.
In fact, their
Exactly.
incentive is let them waste their time on this one person. Sure, they rack up kills, but it's diminishing returns.
Right.
Let us, as four players now, figure out how we're going to win 4-on-5, which might mean split pushing, ratting, whatever it's going to
Yeah.
be. Basically, treat the new player like a handicap.
Yeah. So like that would be bad.
Yeah,
Um, but and it seems like Dota does have this issue too. Like there's not a because these games are so complex, and because they have so much going on with them, how do you teach people this without just again throwing them to the wolves? Because like basketball and soccer are much simpler games.
yeah,
Like I I can take a kid and be like, okay, don't use your hands, kick the ball only, or kick. You can use your head if you want. Go nuts. Um, get it into that net or get it past that goal. Like
hmm
that is so easy to explain. Basketball, like here's how you dribble. The touch rules, like that's pretty quick. Get this ball into that hoop. Keep them from getting their ball into your hoop.
yeah. I think what's nice about that is that these games have like hierarchies of complexity where you could absolutely start someone off just like don't worry about these very high level concepts, like we don't need to
Mm-hmm.
worry about plays yet. I just need to understand like the basic rules of it, and if you can understand the basic rules and know to pass to someone else and like be a team player, you're probably going to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think League of Legends and Dota just like generally fail at that.
Yeah.
Smite 2 and all these other games, they fail at this idea that having very reliable ways to be successful don't generally exist for a lot of the champions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's like thinking more on the sports analogy. I feel like League has the pickup style of soccer, basketball, but the complexity of American football.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely.
And that's a bad combination.
Yeah. Well, it's good if you want to people to feel like they've sunk so much time
Right.
into the game and now like they can't go to somewhere else because they've invested, hundreds of hours, literally hundreds of
Mm.
hours just to like be what they would probably consider themselves like competent.
Right.
Yeah.
The sunk cost fallacy, sure. But like to bring in new players and all of that, um, that's rough.
Yeah.
That's really, really rough. Like, it's so hard to. And then going back to some of the other things too, like with the high pressure situation, right? Like, I'm a new player coming in. Oh, they've announced that I've died 5 times.
Yeah.
and now everyone's flaming me because we got into that information thing about how they convey like that. It's not fun, like, to be a new player, to fail and have that failure be broadcast the entire game.
Yep.
So like the other team might be laughing at you for sucking, your team screaming at you for sucking. Who wants to stay in that environment?
Yep. So there are two examples that I think of for other MOBAs that I think have done it better than League of Legends. Not to just like consistently kick this game.
Mm.
It's fine.
It's in the
Dota.
title. We're going to be kicking League the entire episode.
Well, as long as I can follow your lead, then it's fine.
Right.
So Dota has a matchmaking, game mode called Limited Heroes. So Limited Heroes, you can only pick from 20 heroes. So down from 120, I think I said, down to just 20. And that's 20 for 10 players, 5-on-5.
Right.
Which means if you play Limited Heroes enough, you're going to get like a really, really good smorgasbord of everything that most champions can do. And what's also kind of interesting, I don't know if they've changed this because it's hard to know what the new player user experience is, but I recall back when new players that are like actually new and the game has looked at you how you play the game and has determined that you're pretty new to MOBAs, will actually force you to only play Limited Heroes for like the first, I don't know, 10 games or something like that.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. I know it feels like from a user, you're like, oh, that kind of sucks. Like, I feel like you're babying me. But there's also probably part of you that's like relieved that you see all 120 characters on your screen, but only 20 of them are selectable.
Right.
And you know that the other team can only pick 20 of them.
Yeah.
That's really, really nice.
I think League would benefit from having more steps up, right? Because going from bots to just like, here's Summoner's Rift, have fun.
Yep.
You're not going to have fun.
No.
And that's hard, right? It's hard to design that. Like, they used to have like a 3v3 mode, but they got rid of that after they got rid of Dominion because no fun allowed. No, I'm not bitter.
Punch your card.
Punch your card. But like that didn't actually turn into like the Twisted Tree Line, which was a 3v3 map, didn't become any kind of a training thing. It just became the place for people who couldn't hack it because it had its own ranked system, which Dominion never got. Punch your card. Because it had a rank system, it just became the place for people who struggled in regular 5v5 ranked to get the ranked gold rewards because it was easier to rank up in Twisted Tree Line.
Yeah.
So like the idea of having like a 3v3 map for beginners to kind of get used to it makes sense.
Yeah.
But it didn't get used that way, so they got rid of it. I don't even know if that was their initial intent with that map either. Just it could have been that they were just trying to make something quicker and more skirmishy, and then it didn't catch on with the community, which ultimately they decided to put all of their eggs in the Summoner's Rift basket outside of ARAM, which the community basically forced them to make because they kept making custom games for it.
Yeah.
Like, there's not a good way to encourage teaching, and it's a hard problem to solve because these games are so complex.
Yeah, the 3-on-3 example is very interesting because in Smite, where they have a 3-on-3 version called Joust, it's a completely different game. Like, you have to reform your brain to think on 3-on-3.
Which I think Twisted Tree Line ended up being too. Like, it had its own meta.
And for basketball and soccer and hockey and all of these sports, when you go to 3-on-3, you have to play significantly different than you would on 5-on-5. So basically, it's not even like a leg up. You're just learning a brand new game.
Yeah, exactly.
That can also be very intimidating. It's also generally not great for learning the base game, as it were.
Yeah, which I think is ultimately why they chose to go in on Summoner's Rift, right? Is like, this is our game. This is what we're teaching. Yep. This is what we want everyone to be taught. And those of you who want to play a different game, well, just go play a different game. But and like, I'm not sure I have a solution to this, especially if you can't really set up bots to jungle. It's like, what is the answer, right? How do we, how do you design this experience to be friendly to new players?
So one thing that I thought Honor of Kings did really, really well. So it's a mobile game, so you have a lot less real estate to show information. So first of all, you only get 2 skills and 1 ultimate. So
Mhm.
it's already much, much simpler than
Yeah.
other games. Some champions break that mold, but they're exceptions.
Yeah.
Every skill only has a 1-word description on it. So a skill is either a movement skill, a damage
Mhm.
skill, I think shot, and crowd control.
Right.
I think those are like the main ones. So you could read the full like description of it, but the game has understood that inside a game, you really just need like one idea, like this is what this button does, and you press that button and a thing happens. And I think that's really, really good because it means even someone who's brand new to the game, if they can just understand now's a good time to move, now's a good time to hit really hard, or now's a really good time to crowd control. If you can just get that down, you're already going to be like up there. You're well on your way to becoming like a more competent and effective player.
Yeah.
And I think Dota and League of Legends should learn from that because I say this a lot. I don't know if you ever hear me when I'm playing League of Legends, but I'll just like mumble to myself like I'm not reading all that shit. And
Oh
League of
yeah.
Legends has a terrible like track record of just like abilities, like it's ridiculous.
Abilities are so long now. Like I in playing ARAM, I got certain champions that I hadn't had before. So I'm like trying desperately to read their tooltips in the 5 seconds that I have before we have to warp up and start fighting. And
Yeah,
that's just not happening. Like I've started pulling up ARAM builds for champions I've never played before and using like the website to read how their skill works, and I'm still not getting all of it in
absolutely.
between like when I load into the game and when like I pulled it up. So like it's like, there's so much complexity, and there are 170 of these guys.
Yeah. And I think if more games just had this idea of just like it has a 1-word description and like it will move, and when you click the button, it's a low cost thing and you get to see how they move,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably going to make the right brain connection and understand how this could be useful inside of a team fight.
Yeah. Yeah, like scope and like scope and complexity creep is always a thing. League of Legends is 2009, so it's like 15 years old.
Yep.
Oh, I feel old. Okay.
It can drive next year, right? Oh, it can drive this year.
Yeah, yeah. It could get its learner's permit. That's scary. Okay.
Yeah.
Um uh but like it's so complex. And now I'm going to harp on last hitting because I hate last hitting. That's another big thing you need to learn, right? Like League puts so much emphasis on like getting the last hit. For
Mm-hmm.
the minion to get the gold, you need to last hit. In the update to Summoner's Rift, I was pleased to see they did this. ARAM also does this. If you're in the vicinity, you can soak a smaller amount if you don't last hit. But in general, there's still a lot of that emphasis on last hit, to the point where like if you came in from League watching the pros, you will see circumstances where the pros will intentionally hold off on killing someone to give the kill to a carry.
Yep.
Like that is the degree of which there is such an emphasis on last hitting as a mechanic. And it is extremely fiddly. In my opinion, it's not
Yes.
very fun. And it's not really a transferable skill. Like if you're good at last hitting creeps, you haven't really gotten good at like pushing towers, fighting champions, any of that. You're good at judging health bars or like comparing numbers, and
Exactly.
that's really it. So I think that's kind of emblematic of a lot of some of the issues that League runs into. Is there's so many fiddly bits, like extra layers of complexity, and it's just overwhelming to a new player.
Absolutely. Yeah, last hitting is such a weird thing because of course it comes from Warcraft 3,
Right.
where you're here in Defense of the Ancients when it was first built, you only got gold from last hitting, but that wasn't like a designed mechanic. That's just how the game is.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're only controlling the one unit. So of course you have to kill it in order to get the gold.
Yeah.
And you're right.
It was a technical aspect of the custom game that it was.
Yeah. And to some degree, people liked it because it was basically creating this kind of skill barrier where it's like, if you cannot do this one thing and you cannot judge it, you can't see it, you can't feel it into it, you're just bad at the game.
Yeah.
Which it creates kind of like skill barrier, which for some people is really nice because you get to, once you cross that skill barrier, you feel really good about it. But the other part of it is if you're below that skill barrier and you're just like constantly fumbling it, you're going to lose that game.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought this up because I did want to talk about this too. I think at its core, a lot of the issues that League of Legends runs into is because they are taking the game that they are taking from is not built for new players. Simply put, Defense of the Ancients was a mod on Warcraft 3. So to get into it, you need to be good enough at Warcraft 3 to be integrated into the online competitive scene of Warcraft 3, right?
Yep.
So like to even see this game, you need to already have a decent mastery with this other game, which means you know kind of how these heroes work already. You know how to play the game, you know how like the click mechanics work. And then the game itself was built by modders, so not professional game designers. This isn't necessarily a problem. There are a lot of great things modders turn out. However, and this is something I have noticed a lot, non-professional like fan designers tend to design to a degree of difficulty and complexity that is comfortable to them. This is a very common thing for new game designers.
Yeah.
This isn't necessarily bad. You can get some very cool things from it. However, in most cases, fan games, like, and you see this a lot with like fan Pokemon games, are extremely inaccessible to newer players because they are designed for super fans. So, from a game design perspective, League's construction puts it in a very, very hard place to bring new players in because it is taking from a popular mod that was already designed around a certain level of skill and complexity as a requirement to a bar of entry and attempting to repackage this as a free MOBA. Obviously, it worked. I mean, like,
Yeah.
for the time, it worked very well. It was one of the most played video games in the world. The world is very different now. Like, we have phone games, for example. The world that League of Legends came into is not the world that exists anymore. And in a circumstance where you might want to have new players coming in, that works to its detriment because even with all of the changes that they've made as they've been trying to make it more accessible, it is still at its very core a highly complex game designed for extremely experienced people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been interesting to spend time in Honor of Kings because it's a newer game designed for mobile devices. So it's within this kind of like idea of mobile gaming space. And the design decisions they make, such as one word descriptions of abilities, reducing it down from 3 abilities down to 2, making the map smaller, and making games basically last only 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
These are all things that I think were really, really smart and were done on purpose by people who like really love design and were looking to build a very specific kind of experience for a wide swath of players.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if I were to be designing a MOBA today, I would not. Well, one, because I'm not a fan of the laning style, but I wouldn't go to that as my core design concept because I would want to make a game that reads easy, that's easy to pick up, and then put a lot of the complexity and the mastery of like the plays and things like that, mastering the different kind of aspects of it. Heroes of the Storm, which I played for a while, had some really good inclinations in that direction. They made the game to be shorter. The heroes, I think, were a bit less complex than League heroes. They did more fun things with them too. Like they had this two-headed ogre that was controlled by 2 players, so like they were more willing to do weird things. And you just had to be in lane and soak to get experience. I kind of They paired it with the entire team shares experience, which I did not like because there was no way to individually perform well and then turn a bad situation. Like, for all I knock it, I do appreciate that League does have a way for a higher performing player to kind of help turn around or carry a game, which was a lot harder in Heroes of the Storm, where if your team fell behind, then you're just behind, and Now it's 5 of you having to fight 5 people with boxing gloves with knives attached to
Yep.
them.
Yep.
So I think it fell down there, but it was very interesting to see kind of trying to design with the more simple laning with no real jungler role and just having jungle monsters that you clear the camps and then they start sieging. So like you would as a team go for an objective, which I feel like Smite also kind of has.
Yeah, Smite has like the laning phases still and everything like that. It still has the last hitting. But Smite is like a wholly different user experience because of the different camera and the way it kind of does abilities and whatnot.
I remember I was able to perform really well on that ice guy just because I was really good with the ice wall. Like I remember like my second game ever, I was playing that and you were like praising me because I just like trapped 3 people into your murder blender, and that was a good feeling.
No, it was amazing and that comes down to like the intuition from League of Legends where you just have good ideas of positioning and whatnot. Which unfortunately, to kind of your point, like how do you build that intuition for a positioning in a game like this? You sink 100 hours into it.
Yeah.
Honor of Kings and Pokemon Unite are very interesting because Honor of Kings, your experience constantly ticks up. So even if you're dead, your experience is going up. So you'll level up while you're dead. And by a certain time...
Dominion did that.
Did it? Ooh.
Punch a card.
But that means by a certain period of time, even if you have an advantage, right, you can hit the max level faster. But even if you do nothing, you'll eventually hit max level if the game goes long enough.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting because it kind of means that you're kind of always into it. League of Legends, for example, if I spend 80% of my time respawning, I'm never going to catch up.
Nope.
Like I just can't. And it's also
or
at
if
that
you
point,
disconnected for 5 minutes, you're never going to catch up.
Exactly. And then Pokemon Unite is interesting because the game is only 15 minutes. The game will just stop, regardless of win condition. So if you're behind, what you can just do is just stay and farm jungle. And when you farm jungle, you're still accumulating points that you can score for your team. So even if you're just behind, you're just going to play like a solo RPG.
Yeah,
you can still be like a help to your team. Yeah,
and I think that's a big factor in like more modern is having accessible win conditions that are pretty easy to pick up.
Yeah.
Which again, as you're starting to see, like League being a very old game is running into a lot of these problems where it's kind of the weight of the years becomes cumbersome, right?
For sure. And we're seeing it in like their design decisions too, where they're introducing new kinds of ways to engage with the IP that are not Summoner's Rift, right? So there's like it's not called auto chess; it's called something else.
Teamfight Tactics. I play that a lot because when I was working a fully remote job that a lot of my time was spent just waiting for tickets, I would run that in the background because it was super easy to just kind of like fiddle with it and go, and then do my other stuff while I'm doing that.
And it's honestly like super fun. Like it's actually a super well designed game. I'm bad
really
at
it.
Teamfight
Tactics.
I'm bad at it, but like I know if I invested time in it, I would get good at it. I just
don't.
Yeah.
No, like that. Teamfight Tactics makes my brain chemicals go into happy places because like I like kind of that strategizing and like positioning and itemization and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Dota played around with that too with auto chess. Same idea and things like that. And I think what's interesting was that it used its basically existing IP. Like you knew these champions, you knew these heroes, you kind of knew what they did. So it made it easier for you to jump in and start playing around with it.
And that's exactly what Teamfight Tactics is. But like they've also made Valorant, they've made Arcane. I think honestly, I think Riot understands that like League of Legends will always be their flagship, but it's not gonna be their profit center going forward.
Probably, yeah. And the last thing I want to say about that one was Pokemon was interesting because Pokemon obviously is a huge existing IP. So it also kind of relied on the fact that if you engage with it, you kind of already know what these Pokemon are. Yeah. Elements doesn't really play into it, but you kind of know that this particular Pokemon sprays water out of their mouth. And you're like, that's probably going to be something I should look out for. And lo and behold, it does. And then when you play the game, you like begin making those connections and it feels like you're starting with like a head start because you've already engaged with the IP, which is another interesting and very clever, I think, way of designing the game.
Yeah.
Because you could totally just like say, oh, this Pokemon, I'm going to completely redesign how its kit is different from the game so that works better for the MOBA. And that would be a huge misstep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's because you're building on an existing property. Now, does Pokemon Unite, do you just like pick a certain evolution level or do you like evolve during the game or?
So for most Pokemon, they evolve just based on level up. So
Okay.
Slowpoke evolves to Slowbro at level, I forget, four,
Oh, I
five, or
love that
six.
because that's what I would have done too, right? Where you start with the starter and then you evolve actually during the
Yeah.
match. I
So for
love
example,
that.
on the Pokemon Select stream, you're gonna pick Charizard,
Mhm.
but you're gonna start off as a Charmander, and then as the game
Oh, I love
progresses, you
that.
do evolve, but it's not a choice you make; it just happens throughout the progression, and that's a really good design choice too, because again, just reducing the cognitive load, trying to
Mhm.
make it as accessible as possible to everyone, and also having that really good feel good moment.
Yeah,
Like when
yeah,
you evolve into another Pokemon, there's not that much fanfare; like it's just a level up, but you get to see your sprite change, and it's seamless, and it's great, and it feels good.
yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. Um, but yeah, and like that I think is a big it's a big problem with League, right? It's like you're not getting new players because it's not designed to be welcoming to new players.
Yeah.
Um, which means that the those who stay are the most determined and kind of set in their ways um, of like the people, which I think is a great time to segue into talking about League's community.
Yeah, yeah, this was coming.
Yeah, this has been coming for a bit. So I was there. I was there in the time where League had decided that they were going to put a rioter who went by Riot Light, Lyte, who also kind of had an insert character, I believe. I think he was like Ezreal's uncle or something in the war. Um, he was their big community manager. He was a like doctorate of psychology. Um, and people would go into the forums and ask about their bands, and this guy would just upbraid them. Like, here's all of the bad stuff you did. This is why
Wow.
you were banned. And the community loved it. And like I kind of enjoyed it too in the moment, right?
Sure.
Like, you're seeing someone get smacked down who's being awful, and like that's a good feeling. But also like stepping back, you're like, that's kind of fucked up. That a Riot employee is like posting your chat logs and like savaging you about your own behavior. And like, what is this? Is this encouraging a good environment? I don't think so.
Hmm.
Um, Also, I'm looking it up because I knew that there was a scandal behind this man too.
Oh man.
Um, Apparently he was like cheating on his fiance or something.
Oh.
Um, but yeah, it looks like there's a whole lot of stuff too. So like this guy wasn't exactly clean either.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, so like, what does that say?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's so wild because when your community manager is basically antagonistic,
Mm-hmm.
they're managing the community with antagonism. So of course, it reasons that the community becomes antagonistic.
Right.
That's what I had no idea this actually happened.
Yeah, because like I was there when this was happening. Um, and like because the community loved it, right, when he was doing his thing, and then he later left, and then like I think later on there were the various allegations and stuff coming out, and because I remember it blipped later, and like that was just an icky feeling, right? Like this
Mhm.
guy who'd been calling people out, like who also was doing all this shady stuff behind the scenes. It
Wow.
was just like, oh my god. But I remember too, just like watching League come up and the culture that was formed around it. They definitely really leaned into the gamer bro
Right. Right.
subculture. I this will probably be something for another episode, but something I've wanted to do for a while is bring an artist on here and go over women's designs and have them like talk about the posing and the outfit design and stuff like that. But like League of Legends, especially early League of Legends, with a lot of the art, very much like would sexualize the women. Um, Supports, for example, like with the entire meta surrounding the support role of like this is a role that needs to babysit your carry basically and like sacrifice your life and your gold for the carry. Um, most of the best supports were all women.
Of
So like
course, yeah.
there is this huge undercurrent of misogyny. I knew several women who played it who would not like very neutral screen names. Not really, because
Yeah.
it was not a good idea. Like the screen name I go under, I don't feel like it's especially masculine because I use Azure Chrysan, since Azure Chrysanthemum I can get, um, which I feel like is reasonably femme, but people will still mostly read me as a guy unless I correct them, which I may or may not, based on my mood. Um, but like it's fraught, right? It's fraught being a woman there, and I do feel like there was definitely some encouragement of that, or at least tacit acceptance, because I would watch some of the pro scene, and the pro scene in EU in Europe had an amazing host. Shocks, I believe she went by,
Mm.
um, and you could not look at the Twitch comments anytime she was on screen.
Wow.
The torrent of like hair-raisingly inappropriate things people would say about her and her body whenever she was on screen was absolutely sickening. And she was extremely professional. She was extremely competent. She showed less cleavage, I think, than I am showing currently right now, in most of her things. Like she was just like business suits and
Right,
attire,
right.
right? Like she was super knowledgeable. She was super professional. She had a very pleasant accent. Like the way she spoke was just nice to listen to. Um, but oh my god! And also too, like she was a host.
Right.
Eventually, they finally started letting her come onto the analytics desk and stuff like that because she knew it. But like for a long time, she was kind of removed from the the main professional side of it. She was the one who was hosting, and it's like seeing the reaction to the Twitch chat, and none of that was getting modded. Like they just let that go.
Wow.
Like that creates an environment. And I'm not saying this is still the case, obviously, for League, but especially considering that League is not set up to welcome new and beginning players, and a lot of that fan base is going to be stagnant. And as you mentioned, I think earlier, like they can't really punish some of the higher paying people, right? With where like if a lot of your high payers, your whales are the more toxic players, you got to kind of try and keep them in, even if you're smacking them down.
Yeah,
Capital incentive there being a problem, but like it's hard to turn that around when you've permitted it.
for sure. I think Dota, of course, doesn't have a very positive community either. It's quite
Mm-hmm.
toxic.
Yeah.
But I do know that they really issue bans quite harshly.
Mm-hmm.
And I do know that they moderate their chats and whatnot very, very strictly. Now that's because Valve has probably more resources than Riot. I don't think that's a very controversial thing to guess, but they're investing it back into this kind of community management type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You shared your story about this caster, and Dota had a caster too. Her name is Shivar, and she was treated. There were some
Mm-hmm.
cringe comments and things like that, but in general, it never got as bad as what you're describing.
Yeah.
And I think that's because there were managers who were there to make sure that people that say this kind of stuff, they're banned from the Twitch channel, right? Like you
Yeah.
don't come back.
Yeah. Like this is your employee. Why are
Yeah,
you not protecting her?
yeah.
um,
Um, And then, in terms of the actual game and bans and reporting and things like that, insofar as League of Legends goes, I report people all the time.
oh yeah.
I don't think anything really happens with it because if I report, probably like to your point, like a whale and they're spending $10,000 a month on this game, they're not getting banned.
Like I actually, my cousin's a friend of my cousin plays League, and this guy is like he's a soccer hooligan or
Hmm?
a football hooligan, depending on your region. Um, and he is constantly chat banned, like
Wow.
because he gets super toxic. But he hasn't ever been permanently banned. He's just like constantly in and out of chat ban. Like it's kind of a funny thing to us because we kind of know the guy, and he was always very nice to us. Like he's not a bad person, but like the amount of vitriol, like I'd never seen him go off. So I've only seen kind of like his more reasonable persona. Um, but like I just think about that, I'm like, damn, I like this guy. He probably shouldn't be allowed to play anymore if he's constantly getting chat banned.
Yeah. I think what was interesting is I try my best to find this stat, but I remember about a decade ago, Valve released some stats on their reporting system. So
Mm-hmm.
in Dota, if you get reported for toxic behavior, you get put in low priority. So instead of finding a game in 30 seconds to a minute, it might take you 5 minutes to find a game. And you're only paired up with other people who are low priority because they've also been misbehaving.
Oh, they have a toxic pit. That's
They have a
something
toxic pit.
I've long advocated for these games.
Yeah, so you get thrown into the toxic pit. And the only way out of the toxic pit is to win 3 games. Not play 3 games, you have to win.
Right.
So you have to figure out a way to work together as 5 toxic people for the win. Now you're
Are
all
you getting
incentivized
are
to
you
do
getting
it.
match made against other people in the toxic pit, or is it
Yes.
you're? Oh, okay.
So it's purely it's 5-on-5 toxic people.
So they made the Thunder down.
Yeah, and the only way out of it is to win 3 times,
Oh, lovely.
which is great. Also, it's low priority, which means when you get into the match, you don't get to pick from the entire pool of champions. They give you 3 random ones. You have to pick one of those 3. So it's actually it's very very punishing, and it's a really bad experience.
Yeah.
And the reason I brought this up is because again I can't find this one, so unsourced. But I think it was like 60% of people who get in low priority for toxic behavior never get good in low priority again, ever.
I don't doubt. I
Yeah,
don't doubt. Um, League would release stats about how people who get reprimanded tend to not. So like the things that they did do seem to work, but then I look at my cousin's friend and I'm like,
right. Yeah,
really though? Because like obviously the company releasing their stats, they can make them look however they want. But you were also showing me that wonderful graph in Dota that I really liked with like that player positivity score where they like show like the actions taken on reporting and stuff like that.
yeah, for sure. Like, yeah, every month, at the end of the month, you get like a behavior scorecard that
Mm-hmm.
kind of pops up when you first log in.
It's your
And it's
report
so
card.
interesting. It's so fun. It's your report card, and it's called your player behavior summary. And you have a behavior score, and it comes like red, yellow, or green, depending on where you are. And that's actually a number, right? So it's like 10,000 is like your A plus rank, and then it goes down from there. So it tells you how you've been doing. And I don't know how it calculates this. I don't think Valve ever released how it calculates it, but it's got to be a mixture of how people respond to you. So they give you a kudos at the end of a game,
Mm-hmm.
minus your reports and things like that. Um, and on top of my behavior score, it gives me a communication score, which is also really kind of fun to see.
Yeah.
But my favorite part is that it gives me a list of all of the actions taken against people I've reported, and it has dates and times on it. So it's like your match 9998841 played on this date at 1 a.m. We banned this person, or action was taken against this specific person. Thanks for your report.
Yeah. Yeah. Like Riot always obfuscated that.
Yeah,
Which I get some of the like they don't want to talk about it, but it does also drive that feeling that what you're doing it doesn't seem to mean anything, especially because Dominion punch a card.
yep,
We had a notorious cheater, like he was running actual like very visible hacks. He would always play the character Nidalee, and it would like you would see kind of the character jerk around because it was always like reading the information and
yep,
making her move in certain ways. And like that man got reported constantly, never got banned. And he was just kind of fouling up the higher level Dominion queues. Um, he was beatable
yeah,
because he wasn't a good player. And all he was really doing was just moving his character around. But like they didn't do anything. So like that,
yeah,
especially in circumstances like that, it drives that impression that like, are you doing anything? I'm not sure that you're doing anything.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Like in a game where being toxic and being nice are seen as the exact same from like
mhm.
a overall community management standpoint, why would you not be toxic?
Yeah,
Right? Like I'm not gonna be toxic because that's like a decision I'm making personally, but the game is not informing that decision at all.
yeah,
Whereas in like Dota or other games where they have these like really harsh punishments, the game is telling you if you keep doing this, we're going to keep punishing you. It's going to get worse and worse. It's going to escalate.
Yeah.
And you will get permanently banned from Dota. A lot of people do get permanently banned from Dota.
Which is something that kind of needs to happen if you're going to keep your community clean. Like I mentioned 14 earlier. That's something 14 tends to be pretty good about. There are definitely issues that have come up where people have talked about instances of certain players who've acted poorly and haven't seen. So it's not perfect.
Yeah.
But 14 generally does have a reputation of cracking down pretty hard on certain behaviors.
For sure. Yeah. And I think, yeah, Square Enix and Valve, they're obviously investing all these resources into their community to make sure that the players leave with that kind of experience. And I think Riot just generally doesn't prioritize that. And I think it shows, and I think the effect is felt severely by every single one of its players.
And that's just it, is that permissiveness creates a structure to be more toxic. And I say this all the time. Like, conventional wisdom is you can't crack down too hard on it, because like if the gamers leave you, then nobody is going to play your game. I am very strongly of the opinion that if you police your community with attention and vigor, you will be able to attract people who aren't gamers, TM, right? Like, you'll be able to attract people to your game who don't tend to play these games because they are so toxic.
Exactly.
Like, there are a lot of people who just don't want to deal with that. Like, I am pushing 40. I only have so much patience for like children yelling slurs at me.
Yeah. I don't know how things are going to progress in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of like the MOBA space. Like, part of me obviously wants communities to be better managed, and that is going to mean these like moderated behaviors, banning people, muting people, that kind of stuff. But to your point, if I am a really toxic player and I'm a whale and I'm giving this company a lot of my money, can they really ban me? Should they? It doesn't make sense financially. And
we see that in the mobile
game
space, right? Like, where, especially because like in the mobile games, whales are actually encouraged to be basically whatever they want, because they spent the money, they're stronger, they're better. So like, I think back to that horrific video about like this one guy talking about how to go whale hunting or whatever. And then how like his whole goal is getting like a Saudi prince and a high-powered lawyer to get in a fight with each other, among other things of like turning players into payers and all that other horrific stuff. But like, when the financial incentive is to not punish this, well, that's going to be felt in the game, and that is going to incentivize a certain kind of player and a certain kind of person.
Yeah. Going back to more physical sports in terms of the community management and things like that. Obviously, there's really toxic people in physical sports spaces, but there are in-game rules and referees who are usually can intervene and dole out punishments and removals where needed. And that goes for the audience as well. Of course, a referee can just kick you out of the stadium. I don't know if such a thing will ever translate properly to MOBAs, but I do know that at least having some kind of referee that's there, by nature of having a referee who's looking out for behavior and willing to step in, I think that also changes the overall idea of the game. And I think it also sets out this kind of idea that, this game is something to be respected. We take it seriously insofar that, if something is unacceptable, it is clearly unacceptable, and we'll do something about it.
Yeah. I feel like I'm looking it up right now. So League does have a system, which I do appreciate, like, credit where credit is due, of auto muting. But it is very, very specifically for slurs.
Oh, okay.
Where like if someone is using a slur, I think it will just like auto mute them, or like give you the option to mute them. I've seen it come up like once or twice. It's been a bit, but like stuff like that is good.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a good step. But also, like, I feel like slurs should just get you banned.
Yeah. To be honest, I think games should go like the Pokemon Unite way, which is there's no chat or things like that. It's all kind of pre-programmed signals, right? Which, one, makes it more accessible from language barrier point of view, and two, they're actually more efficient. Like, I don't want to have to be typing out messages. I want to be giving signals and playing that way.
So funny thing Final Fantasy XIV's updated PvP does this. And they had to put a hold on the good match ping because people would start spamming good match after falling behind.
Yep.
So toxic people will certainly find a way.
They'll find a way, yeah. But I mean, that's where you have to have those checks and balances where it's like, that is now like a bannable offense or that's a punishable offense.
Well, now they just lock it. You can only say good match in like the few seconds after a game has been decided.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that's
I don't
even
necessarily
easier.
think that's the right way to go, but because like the spammers are like, I haven't played too much 14 PvP. I like the 14 PvP; it's pretty good, but
Yeah.
I haven't played it as much recently. But like a spammer could still just like, as soon as that thing comes off, if you lost, they could just start spamming good match, and that would still get the message across. So I don't think that's quite the right solution, but I do generally think that's not a bad position, especially for like Nintendo.
For sure.
Does not want people typing slurs at the kiddies who are trying to play the Pokemon MOBA.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But yeah. Ultimately though, like this community toxicity is just a point of like kind of that bigger, like the game itself and its design is driving a lot of toxic behaviors, which are then exacerbated in my eyes by the way that they've approached the community management aspect. All of this kind of feeds on itself, right? Like it's, if you want to ask the question like, why is League so toxic? I feel like, as we sort of outlined, it's a confluence, right? Like there are all of these factors that go into making it toxic. And I know we've been beating up on League a lot, and this whole episode kind of is to it, but like I am going to say too, like this isn't all their fault. They were using a design that had been very popular. It was very like, I can see the business case for it of like, people seem to want this. We can make this mode more mainstream. But because I feel like it wasn't necessarily examined as intricately, and based on the things I've heard about early Riot's culture, it wasn't a priority. A lot of these toxic things that could potentially be modified with early, consistent, and diverse playtesting didn't really get caught and have thus become baked into the game and into the game's systems.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's
and
really,
I mean, like
really
Dota
well
2
put.
seems to have some of those issues too, right? Like,
For
again, they're
sure.
using that Dota model, and as resultantly, like there are certain things that can make things more toxic, right?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, like Dota, Smite also can be quite toxic as well. I'm thinking like Pokemon is maybe one of the least toxic ones, but there are other design factors, community managers, and other decisions made way, way upstream that are influencing that. And Riot, you know, for all the history here, is really kind of working with an antiquated designed system.
Yeah, and like, and it has gotten better. I have
For
definitely
sure.
noticed that it is better, even just like playing ARAM as I have been, just like crashing into ARAM because I'm currently unemployed. Hopefully that will be ending soon. But like I'm just like, I'm unemployed and my country's burning to the ground. I'm gonna play ARAM.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's a choice I'm gonna make. But it has gotten better. Like, to their credit, to Riot's credit, it's way better than it was in my earlier experience. But I don't know that it's entirely fixable because of the issues we've outlined in the game design.
Yeah.
That said, though, we're going almost 2 hours. I want to take a brief moment to like just talk a bit, and this could be an entirely its own episode, but like just to talk a bit, be constructive here. Like, what are some things we think might help kind of
Yeah.
turn it around?
Yeah. I think right off the bat, I already mentioned it, but I think really short ability descriptions to lower the actual learning curve helps a lot.
Yeah.
I want people to feel like they're fighting I want to feel like they're clashing against other players, not
Mm-hmm.
feel like they're clashing against the system. So that we can popcorn this, but that'll be my very first one. I think the actual user experience in terms of the buttons you press should be immaculate, should be squeaky clean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And League has run into that problem, especially as they're creating newer characters. Things are getting more and more complicated, which
Mm-hmm.
again goes back to that big legacy system of there are 170 of these guys now. Um, it makes that harder. But I do agree. Like I think
Yeah,
cleaning up UI and descriptions and stuff like that to have more simplified. Um, Expanding on that personally, what I would do is I would have a very basic like this is how this works, and then I would let you kind of unfold it to give like the full like stat descriptions. Especially for new players, those damage numbers mean nothing.
exactly. Yeah. I think something else I would really like. I really do like Dota's behavior score. I like
Mm-hmm.
feedback as a player. I want the game to say to me like, "Hey, one, thank you for trying to be positive community member and reporting people where you felt it was necessary. Here's what we did about it. Two, we've been watching your chat logs and things like that, and based on our algorithms, we think you're actually doing a great job. Continue that up. You make the community a better place. That just feels good. I think that's a great user experience, and I think helps promote more positive community.
From the design perspective, I've seen them. I've seen them move and kind of their again like as I understand it, the Noxus season where they've made all of these tweaks to how the main mode works as only for quick play. It's not for ranked. I'm not going to really touch the ranked since they've kind of got their established esports thing. So I like not changing that makes sense for them. Personally, I think, and this would require a lot of changing to the system, but it's not outside of their capability. What I would do is I would start trying to set up a system where money is gained by doing your job well. So, like, instead of having a kill be based on whoever got the last hit, I would apportion money based on who did the most damage. It's like if the carry did 75% of the damage, the fact that it was the support's errant little like shot that ended up actually finishing wouldn't matter, right? Like give the carry and let players kind of pick and choose, right? Like we recommend this economic set, for example, where you will get rewarded for doing high damage.
Yep.
Or we recommend this, which you will get rewarded for soaking damage, or you'll be rewarded for placing wards or clearing wards, stuff like that. Like I think having systems that reward specific behavior and performing your job well over like everyone has the same reward system and like the supports are required to take like this weird economic item that lets them kind of like sacrifice everything and get like passive income, and then like the tank who ends up in top lane has to still do all of this last hitting and stuff like that too, but they're gonna have to itemize into bulkiness or whatever. Like I think having systems to encourage and reward the actual play behaviors that you want would go a long way towards reducing the fiddliness of like the last hitting, which I hate with a burning passion and
Yep.
will rage about it every opportunity. So get rid of that, which I don't expect Riot would follow that because obviously that is a big part of their core identity. But like I think it would be good. But like incentivizing players to play in a way that they should be and getting them in that mindset would probably go a long way to help enforce like this big intricate role system that you have set up.
Yeah. Yeah, now you mentioned it, Dota did introduce recently, like in the last couple
Mm-hmm.
of years, incentives for supports to do more support jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So you get money now for dewarding. So every time
Yeah.
you destroy another ward, you get money, and it's actually a lot of money. You can
Mm-hmm.
like you can eat well off that.
Yeah.
Um, League of Legends doesn't have this, but have you heard of stacking camps in Dota?
I have not.
In World of Warcraft, sorry, not World of Warcraft, Warcraft 3, every neutral creature has a spawn point.
Mm-hmm.
So the game checks on every minute whether the creatures are there, and if it's not there, it spawns them again.
Mm-hmm.
What you can do is you can pull them out of their spawn point to a leash point, and if the
Mm-hmm.
minute crosses over and they're not there, it'll spawn. So now there's two spawns.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, League doesn't have that.
Yeah. So you can do that a lot. it's even more finicky than last hitting. Like it sucks.
Yeah.
And different creeps move at different speeds, and different camps have different leash like lengths. You have to memorize all this crap. But now, when you do that, if you're the support who did that, when the creeps actually die from the carry killing them and farming them, you get a portion of that money.
Nice.
And that's actually it's actually quite a bit of money because you can do this with like really really high strength neutral creeps. So you can make a lot of money off of that.
Yeah, and like I think that is a good, especially like if Dota can do it, League can certainly do it too.
Yeah.
Of like finding ways to in your gameplay incentivize the behaviors that you want.
For sure.
Which they do to a certain point with the objectives. So like that's good, but in the moment to moment play, I think there should be more focus on that instead of just like everyone needs to last hit their creeps, and if you don't, then you'll be behind forever.
I think something else that MOBAs should do and should incentivize is a mentor role. And you should be rewarded for being a mentor. Because we know the game is very complex and it can be really tough out there. But knowing that there's someone who's like, I will nurture you, little sprout, don't you worry about it. And like, I have signed up for this. Like, I willingly want to do this. That can be just like, that can change your third game experience as Lux, turn that into something actually pretty positive. Or yeah, you're still going to die. That you are still in a dying situation.
Yeah.
But they'll explain it to you, and they'll explain why people are mad about you and how to avoid that from happening in the future.
So I do need to talk about this because this is a potential pitfall. So there is a mentor system in Final Fantasy XIV.
Okay.
And it is commonly known as the Burger King crown because people have taken it as a status symbol.
Oh.
So to become a mentor, you need all 3 battle jobs at maximum level for that expansion, and you need 1,500 commendations. Commendations are kind of a joke.
Yeah.
At the end of a dungeon, it's like, do you want to commend someone? And people will usually just commend the healer or possibly the tank.
Yeah.
And go.
I remember I would just click all the commends. Like, who cares, right?
Yeah. You pick a person to commend, and it's usually going to be the healer because that's just how it goes. So because of this, like they have all of this text about how you need to uphold whatever, you can have access to the novice network, all of that stuff, and people will just click through and they'll proceed so they can have their Burger King crown. And mentors are notoriously some of the worst players in the game, some of the most toxic.
Wow.
A lot of people are like, yeah, I have it, I don't wear my crown, I just try and be a mentor whenever I can. I am in this, like I qualify for the battle mentorship. I haven't even unlocked it yet because I don't want to put that on me. Like I don't raid, I don't do the harder stuff, I don't want that responsibility. I'll help people out in dungeons, but I don't want that. If a mentor system were to be put together, it would need to be treated. And I think a big part of it is Square Enix doesn't mod their mentors the way they should. Like,
fair.
I've heard stories about the novice network, which is supposed to be the novice chat, and how like certain Burger King crowns have just like completely taken it over and turned it into like weird spammy stuff that for whatever reason this chat's not getting moderated well. So like even depending on your server, the novice network might be kind of actually interesting or helpful, or just like an absolute shit show.
Wow.
So
I had no idea about that.
There are pitfalls to a mentor system. I do agree in concept. If I were to do it, I would hold these players to like a pristine standard.
For sure.
Where like they have to like, there should be no flagging of your chat ever. You need to sign on for it. You need to have a certain level of experience. You need to like have a more complicated like social score like you've done. Like if they're doing mechanics like that, you need to have a really good one, and you need to maintain that. So yeah, there are pitfalls to a mentorship system. I think I know what I've always considered, like looking at the broader esports spectrum and stuff like that. Like I've always thought it's like, why aren't you sorting players into like factions, like, and basing some of your pro scene off that, right? Like, what if you could join Noxus or Demacia or whatever, and like maybe get a discount on all of their champions, and then have certain pros be like tagged to this, so you know which pro team to cheer for instead of just like, well, pick the one you like, I guess. Um, Create kind of that regional factionalism, but without having to have this like global region thing that Overwatch League tried to do and failed miserably with. Um, and then with that faction system, have people who mentor for their faction and kind of like shrink the pool and then let the standout players kind of take that on. And also, like, that would be a way to recruit for like pro scene, right?
For sure.
It's like if you've got some of the pro coaches in there who are watching and who like have access to the metrics for their faction, they can use that to kind of try and recruit and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, I definitely hear what you're saying there. And obviously, I love this idea of like wearing colors and going to a bar and like everyone knows the chants and things like that. Like I'm all for sports like hooligan like tomfoolery.
Right. Respectfully, without the dumpster burning, obviously.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna like set a car on fire, but I will be really loud and obnoxious, and that's part of the game.
That's part of the fun, right?
Absolutely.
Like, these are games; they should be fun.
Yeah.
But do we have any other thoughts on this for the good of the order?
I don't think I feel like I got a lot of kind of my thoughts out there, and I do want to thank you for bringing me onto this one.
Oh, absolutely.
Obviously, I'm very passionate about this. You're very passionate about this, and it's great to just have time to sit down and like formally go over our thoughts, write things down, and just have that back and forth. So this was good for me. I don't know if it encouraged me to go play League of Legends after this, but it encouraged me to actually think a little bit, which I think is always good.
No, Steve will be on Dota like after this, probably.
Maybe we'll see.
Thank God I'm not like those League guys. I might play ARAM after this. Who knows? We'll see how we go.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much for joining me. We appreciate your presence as a host, and it's always nice to get to sit down and go over these fun game design issues and talk through.
Absolutely. Can't wait to jump on and talk more about this kind of stuff, because getting into the weeds like this, that is my jam. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Where can we find you, Steve?
You can find me on Blue Sky at DM Steve. That's DM, the letters Steve. It stands for jump into my DMs and tell me about other flaws of a mentorship system and other pitfalls, because I clearly have not thought as much about it as you have, Liana. And then don't follow me on Twitter.
It. You like if you want to learn about mentorship systems, play more 14.
That is something I will consider. But yeah, that's me. Over to you, Liana.
All right. You can find me over at Valeriana. And that is also on Blue Sky, because we don't go to the bad place anymore. And then I am hanging out in the Asians Represent Discord, which I believe you are too.
Yep.
So yeah, if you want to organize an Asians Represent League game, I'll probably join if I'm available. I might hate myself, but I will probably join.
Yeah, same. I'm here for the community, maybe not so much for the game itself.
Right,
but
exactly. You can make anything fun if you're with good people. All right, excellent. Thank you, everyone, for watching. That has been us discussing toxic game design in League of Legends. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.